What is up, everybody? Hey, this is Ryan, and welcome to our Reflections podcast. Hey, I want to tell you about three things today. I want to tell you about how to be your own bodyguard, people on their phones, and then Jesus praying with the disciples in the garden. And I promise I'll connect them. Here's the first one. I read a book. Actually, I heard the podcast first, but then got the guy's book. It's a guy who's a former bodyguard, and he teaches you how to be your own bodyguard. And the opening premise is lovely. I love it. So I tell my kids all the time, one of the sayings in my house is, hey, head on a swivel. In other words, like, look around, pay attention when you're walking out at night. And, I have two young girls, and whenever they're, like walking in the neighborhood, I tell them, hey, head on a swivel, look around, pay attention, look behind you, look on all sides of you. And because this bodyguard, who then, he retires and he writes this book about how to be your own bodyguard, he says most people who are robbed, like at night or whatever, say something like this to the police. They say, oh, they came out of nowhere. And he's like, no, they didn't. You weren't paying attention. They'd been following you for like 5 blocks, or they've been, kind of tracking you for a half an hour. You just never saw them because you weren't paying any attention. You had your head down, or you had your headphones on, or you were just head in the clouds. He's like, if you had been paying attention, you wouldn't have been, robbed like that. And so I tell my kids, hey, head on a swivel, look around, pay attention, and you'll be able to eliminate a lot of nefarious or criminal activity, I would imagine. And that reminded me of another thing. I was at Chipotle the other day, and I walked in. I was standing in line, and I love my phone. I'm not trying to bang the drum about the phones, but you guys, it's seriously a problem. And I was in line at Chipotle, and you know this already. And every single person in front of me, it was 20 people deep. Every person had their head down on their phone. And of course I thought, I'm going to rob them all because they're not paying attention. Just kidding, I didn't though. But and then my son, Gavin, was telling me he went to have breakfast the other day at his school cafeteria, and his buddy and his girlfriend, his buddy and his buddy's girlfriend were having lunch at a table across the room from them, or breakfast or whatever. And they both were on their phones with AirPods in and watching separate things and having breakfast. And maybe it was a prearranged thing, but here's the thing, people just don't pay attention any longer. And there are all these things in our lives that are just so easily accessible that distract us. And we just don't have our head on a swivel, which brings me, of course, to Jesus in the garden. And I love this story for a variety of reasons, but I read it recently with this sort of idea of all the symbolism in this story. And so here's what I think is maybe also going on at some level in the story. Of course, the story is about Jesus getting arrested, Judas coming, the disciples can't stay awake, they're tired. But I think below the surface is all this symbolism that's going on. So here's the story, in case you don't know it. So Jesus, right before he's crucified, goes to this mountain called the Mount of Olives just outside of Jerusalem, just across the Kidron Valley. And on this mountain, there's this garden called the Garden of Gethsemane. It's actually Gethsemane. It's this olive grove. And so he goes there to pray. And he's going there. He tells his followers, I'm going to go there to pray. And to pray, it's he's going to go there to give his attention to God. And one of the ways you could describe God across cultures is God is the highest good. Right? So here's the story symbolically about Jesus going to give his attention undividedly to the highest good. And he tells his followers, his closest disciples, he says, hey, stay here and keep watch with me. You could also say, he says to them, hey, fellas, stay here and keep your head on a swivel. Pay attention and watch with me. And so he leaves and goes forward and he starts to pray. He comes back to check on them, and they're all asleep. And the text tells you because their eyes were heavy. Yeah, no doubt. I've been there. I'm so tired. I can't keep my eyes open. My eyelids feel like 1,000 pounds, and I just doze off without even knowing it. And, but they can't stay awake. And then Jesus is like, hey, guys, wake up. Watch and pray. Keep your head on a swivel, you might say. Pay attention with me and watch so that you will not fall into temptation. And then he says, hey, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He goes to pray again, comes back, and they're asleep again. And here's the deal. They can't do it. It happens 3 times. these guys just are not able to stay awake and pay attention. And they're just like not aware of what's happening all around them, symbolically, the story, like they're sleeping, they're not aware of what's happening, and there's a lot happening all around them. Jesus, their closest friend, or their close friend, their rabbi, their teacher, their model for life, is going to give his attention to God, the highest good, and something, tragic is about to happen, and Jesus is aware of it because he's paying attention, and they're not. They're asleep. And I think on some level, this is a story about what happens when you and I don't pay attention. At the risk of making this story about me, I'm not. It's definitely about Jesus and the disciples, but I think you can read it a few layers down. I'm like, oh, these are the consequences many times of what happens when we don't pay attention. Because listen, if you and I don't live our lives with some level of attention and awakeness and alertness, life can just happen to us. And betrayers and sinners or things like this can sneak into our garden and cause us harm. There are all these things on the edges of our life that distract us and that keep us asleep. Like phones. Again, it happens to me all the time as well, but like our phones or other things that just distract us from life. And so I think there's like this message in here like, hey, pay attention. Watch. The spirit is willing, I know, but the flesh is so weak. But be awake so you can live rightly and pay attention. Now, again, obviously this is a story about Jesus, but it's this compelling image about us and our lives. And the third time they wake up, they've been asleep. Judas is there. And if you don't know the story, Judas is one of the other disciples, but he's betraying Jesus. He's there to sell Jesus out for 30 pieces of silver. He's got an army of people with him. They're armed guards, Romans and Jewish leaders. They're there to arrest Jesus. They've been asleep for so long, this betrayer has snuck in with an armed guard to arrest Jesus. Now, look, it would have happened anyway. I'm not trying to reinterpret the text here. I'm just saying it's an incredible image about what happens when you fall asleep. If you don't pay attention, perhaps it's telling us you can be betrayed by things on the side of your life, at the fringes, at the edges, these things that you let slide or that you were distracted by, or the small things in your life that you let go, or the Bible calls them small foxes. And the betrayer lets in this foreign army because you didn't pay attention. And gosh, I wonder how many people in life, end up so far away from home or where they wanted to be in life without even realizing how they got there. Or how many folks got to the end of their life and thought, my gosh, where did my life go? I've been with many folks who've been, I've helped kind of usher them into the next life, the age to come, who I've been with when they've died. And not all of them are like awake and alert. I don't mean like physically, but like many of them go into this time and like are sort of asking, where did my life go? So much of it slipped by through my fingers. I didn't even know it. I wasn't even paying attention. And like, man, like I really don't want that to happen to me. Socrates once said that the unexamined life is not worth living. In other words, keep your head on a swivel, eyes open, head up, pay attention. I mean, how many of us find ourselves miles down the road, huge complainers, when miles back, it's like just this little tiny complaint sort of snuck into my life, and I wasn't paying attention. And then before I knew it, I was complaining a bit more, and then hanging around others who were complaining, and then like miles later, I'm like a full-blooded complainer. Or my kids call them intrusive thoughts. If you let those intrusive thoughts win over and over and over again, before you know it, you're miles away from home. Or unforgiveness, these things that begin as like small, little, tiny things. And if you aren't paying attention, they can make a nest in your brain, in your mind, in your soul, and begin to breed and build and grow. And then eventually they can sneak in and take over. And before you know it, you're stuck in a trap. So I guess I want to ask you, what are you giving your attention to? What are you looking out for? What are you watching? What are you seeing in your life? Or what is distracting you? What's robbing you of your attention that you might have given to God, or I don't know, even to family or friends or life itself? Like literally the phone is such a great example. It's so easy to pick on it because it happens so frequently. Like how many times are we just have our heads down what do they call it? Like tech neck, like where your head is just stuck in this position where you're like looking down at your hands because we are always looking at our phone. They call it tech neck. Like how much of life is whipping by us. We don't even know it because we're so distracted. By the way, it's Lent. And one of the key facets, I believe, of repentance is to slow down, to think deep, and to pay attention, and then to turn around and come home. So, hey, keep your head on a swivel, eyes up, pay attention. All right, love you guys. Peace. Hey, if you enjoy this show, I'd love to have you share it with some friends. And don't forget, you are always welcome to join us in person at Central in Elk River at 8:30, which is our liturgical gathering, or at 10 o'clock, our modern gathering. Or you can check us out online at clcelkriver.org. Peace.